launched the first official Crossfire. Please come up to the stage. I'll go over here. Welcome, gentlemen.
Hey.
So, I think ground rules here. Let's keep it as informative, and let's no punches below the belt. Let's keep everything open and conversation. But I want to talk about some stuff that's kind of heavy. I want to get into it. There are no softballs. We're not going to go through anything that's easy. This is all going to be hard conversation. I'd like to welcome our guests. We have some very special guests tonight. We're joined today by Larry Quinlan, the Global Chief Information Officer for Deloitte. Larry is actually a principal at Deloitte, been with the firm now for more than a decade, about just
30
years.
More than a decade.
I thought you were only 30 years old. So there we go.
Close.
And so leading all of the technology, strategy, applications, infrastructure, everything. Ritesh is joining us as well from Ogilvy, and Ritesh on the Chief Digital Officer side, so in the health and wellness practice, right? And so very much around that kind of digital transformation and leadership and execution. And we're also joined by Rob. Rob is a CTO for Clear. If you are not familiar, Clear is that service at the airport that allows you to kind of bypass the line and get up to the front.
And so much more.
And so much more that I'm sure Rob will share about. So we have three topics we want to cover today. The first one is really AI. I'm not going to say good or bad, but ultimately kind of where does it fit and what's going to be the impact. I think the second topic is really around CIO. At the role itself and the evolution of it. And then the third topic, if we can get into it a little bit more, is really on privacy and security, maybe some of the ethics conversations. And it's very interesting. I think what a great panel to bring together to talk about this. So thank you all, gentlemen, for being here. Let's start with AI. So on the one hand, I think McKinsey says that by 2030, something like 800 million jobs will be lost worldwide. That's a lot. That's something like 45% of the workforce, if not a little bit more, in terms of talented jobs and skill set jobs. But there's also this kind of flip side to that. Technology may not be a destructive force. It'll create new jobs. Existing roles will end up being redefined. Maybe it'll allow us to focus on things that are higher level. But I guess maybe from your side, and I'll open up to the dais. Is this a beginning of the end, or is this just the end of the beginning?
I'll go. I mean, the obvious piece there. I mean, I don't think in this audience we're talking about like AI in the general sense. We're talking about AI in the specialized sense, actually taking away from individual jobs. But this all started Luddites with looms, with automated looms in the 1800s. Adam Smith talked about late stage capitalism. These are not new. Controversies. I think what we have to really look at is how are we compensating. I think that AI will absolutely create jobs for sure in the sort of social capital economy. I can't speak to, are we going to create jobs that can put food on tables? I think we have to solve that more generally, but from the perspective of producers being able to produce more easily, consumers being able to find and consume precisely what they want to, that will absolutely create a stellar expansion in the ability for us to keep ourselves busy. Now, how we create value and capital and the cheapness of that capital is going to be the interesting next question.
I mean, do you guys feel the same way? Or?
I'm not sure the issue is whether or not it destroys 800 million jobs. Because history has shown that, of course, it's going to destroy 800 million jobs. It might be more. But there'll be a creation of jobs as well as economies mature, as they move to the next revolution, so to speak. The challenge is the intersection, the transition period, because that's where you get hurt. As you're moving from one revolution to the next, you have the dislocation of people before you truly understand the opportunity it creates. And I think that transition period is very difficult. You end up with lots of untrained workers. You have the potential for unemployment to spike. That creates even more political polarization, which then agitates for more protectionism, et cetera, et cetera.
Isn't that what we're seeing right now? I mean, isn't that really the foundation of the unrest we have? I mean,
No, I think it's a lot of fear-mongering, to be honest with you, right? I remember the days when the photocopier and the printer was going to replace paper. We were going to be completely paperless, if you remember those days, right? And oh my God, we're going to put all these people out of business. Secretaries aren't going to do anything. Well, that hasn't happened yet, right? I think the pace of change is changing. So Luddites, when the loom came along, the pace was a little different. You had time to adjust. I think where we're going at the moment is that pace of change is accelerated, so we're not having time to think about these things a bit. The second thing is, if you look at the jobs at the moment, one of the hardest sought after position is a data scientist. You can't find them. Someone's got to teach these AI machines to do things.
But are we training enough data? I mean, like, it
That's
feels
the
like the
problem.
education sector is not even keeping up with the pace.
Exactly. So I think it's an opportunity, to your point. I think it really is an opportunity. The problem we have is that pace is accelerated. So we have to do it faster than we've ever had to do before.
I think you have to look outside of STEM, though, in the sense that a lot of the people that are being displaced are outside of STEM, and really, if we're talking about sort of the people that are tinkering with,
Transportation.
and so it's about reorganizing the distribution of consumption power and redefining what production power means. Right now, we're compensating for production. What is production? And can I compensate for production to be more of a social good? You know, can I compensate for production to be more of an intellectual good?
Well,
and spread that skill set out.
And maybe here's where the rub is, because I think, and I worry about this a lot, right? I mean, I had a moment probably 10 years ago when I realized a lot of the companies that we're bringing into the Fortune 500, a lot of the work that we're doing is basically to automate away humans. And I feel like on the other side of that, you're getting pushed, I'm sure, from a CFO perspective to say, be more efficient, do more. I'm sure RPA came up, I think, in a conversation earlier. I think on the digital side, the more that we can have self-service and have chats and have bots, like all of this stuff in the short term is causing that crunch, and we are running. We are trying to make a fast-paced move to try and automate as much as possible and take the human out of the equation. So, how much of a responsibility do we have as technologists?
But at the same time, we're growing. I've been through a number of these. When we centralized technology, no one in offices around the country would have jobs anymore. It'd all be gone. When we use India as a captive, that's going to strip every technology worker in the United States of a future. When we move to the cloud, oh my God, that's the end of the IT organization as we know it. And if you look at the number of technology people in your IT organizations today, it hasn't gone down, but it's able to do more. It creates far more competitive advantage and value for the organization. It's spread out into dealing with IT for line of business, value creation, et cetera, as opposed to the typical back office. So I don't think it's doomsday at all.
The question is, do we run out of eyeballs? Do we run out of attention? I mean, that's the real economy, right? I mean, so many of us are actually fighting for attention. Some of us are fighting for production of actual, real, tangible goods, but so much of what's growing so fast is that attention. And that's where AI is going to be interesting, because it'll let people maybe use their attention more efficiently and actually sort of leverage on the other side. So where I think from a philosophical, more sort of hippie perspective, we have to figure this out. We may outstrip it because we make attention. I only watch interesting TV shows.
Right?
I only watch TV shows that are amazing.
But
Why?
you probably pay for all of them, right?
But interestingly enough, like I'm not going to spend an hour of my time unless somebody told me it's just amazing, right? Because the choices are out there.
But what it does, it gives you two things. It gives you some efficiency and it gives you scale faster, right? The machines can do things faster than humans can. If you look at some of the use cases we've been looking at lately, working with radiologists, right? The machine is now able to look at X-rays and images of X-rays and make a diagnosis and make a recommendation faster and more accurately than a human does.
And when they can't, it's going to rural Iowa to a doctor sitting in front of an email.
That's right.
There you go.
And I'm going to ask just a finger in the wind question. How long do you think before we pass the Turing test?
I don't think it matters.
I think that's a good answer.
I agree with him. I don't think it matters.
All right, everyone copped out.
Yeah.
I'll call it within the next
No, it's not a cop-out. It's actually...
let's shift topics for a moment. So I think there's actually kind of this long-standing conversation around the role of the CIO, right? And I think you alluded to it a little bit, Larry, and you're in the hot seat because you're the only CIO on the panel. To what extent is CIO literally becoming a less important defunct role, or the more important role than ever now? I mean, if you think Spencer Stuart had some study, I think it said the role of the CIO has changed so much that their tenure is up. And with the tenure being up, from the 3-year average, it puts them in a percentage where, there's a lot more kind of longevity to the role. But in reality, I think it's something like less than than 1% of Fortune 500 CIOs ever become COO or CEO of a company or rise up in the ranks, right? So there's still something wrong. There's still something where it's not that upward mobility. I always thought it was because we talk in bits and bytes and, because we're missing the business problem, but I think we've solved a lot of that. I think the communication is a lot better. There's still something there. If I think of cloud, people said exactly that, right? Why do I need a CIO? I just need a vendor manager. So I'd love to hear, especially because from a chief digital officer perspective, I feel like there's always that butting heads of, well, who owns the data? Who owns the user experience? And then on the CTO side, it's like, you got to deliver, right? So Larry, tell me, what's your side of this? Is the CIO role defunct?
I think it's really dying and rising again if you're a religious person, right? It is, and it's necessary, I think, for that death to create the rebirth. You're just going through these phases. At first, it was an IT manager just doing their best to string some X.25 networks together to make a finance mainframe work. It was the most forgotten position ever. And it became far more valuable, but it really became about keeping trains running on time, being at the beck and call of the CFO, cutting costs, being blamed for the costs being cut. And it's simply, hamster on a wheel. And at the same time, you have all of the fragmentation with CIOs and chief data officers, chief digital officers, chief innovation officers, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I think you're seeing some of it implode in many organizations, really then giving rise to a new thoughtful breed of business executives who have broad, powerful, important mandates to really get stuff done as it relates to technology. Will that role be called the CIO forever? I don't know. I don't even know how it became called the CIO in the first place, right? But, so it might change, et cetera. But make no mistake about it. This role, whatever you call it, isn't going anywhere for a very long time. The name might change, but this role is absolutely critical, more critical than it was before, and will be broader and more powerful.
Ritesh, do you report to a CIO, or who do you report to?
I report to the CEO.
To the CEO,
Yeah.
right? And so do you butt heads with the CIO?
Not as much. I think we have a good working relationship. Butt heads, Bill knows me very well. He's laughing here in the audience here. No, not really. I think we have different roles. Mine's very focused on what are we doing from a customer experience growth, revenue producing stuff that's going on in the marketplace. But
so
also
did you just call him a cost center? Was that what I heard?
Yeah, exactly.
Got it.
I do agree. I think there's always been, the CIO is always being blamed for the efficiency and the cost containment stuff, right? I think the role has to change, though. It's not a matter of is the person going to be there. The person will always be there, but what you call them and what their role is, I agree with. It's more important than ever before. You can call them the chief digital officer if you want, but this whole area around technology and the way it's changing. I was talking to Bill earlier back there, and I said, I feel like I'm back in 1999 again, where that pace of change is exploding,
so fast.
New stuff is coming through, and we're all sitting there, particularly at the enterprise level, going, what the heck do we do? And I think that role has to evolve, and those CIOs that actually embrace all this and start really looking at it from a splitting, here's the enterprise stuff, I've got to keep the thing running, that's fine, blame me for efficiency and cost effectiveness, I'm okay with that. But here's where we're going, and we need to embrace this stuff to change the business we're in, is where it's happening. So I think the role will change.
And Rob, you came into the organization reporting to a CIO.
No.
You didn't? Okay,
no, so I had to actually, it's
Yeah.
interesting. There's two interesting things. First off, I want to take away an entire tier of this, which may not be wildly present in this room, but in the startup and late stage startup, CIO, Chief Digital Officer, Chief Innovation Officer. It's actually, we run into a point, and I've run into this a couple of times, it's actually a place for really savvy, really smart engineers so they can have a C title, and then it becomes very murky. So you have to be very, very clear about what it is, and that was the issue. I was peered to a CIO, and he was the CTO, and while there could have been a clear delineation, it was almost the opposite. leading into the point, the classic definition, the classic difference is the CIO is about the operational infrastructure of information as it flows, and that obviously connects to products, whereas a CTO, if you kind of go by definitions, is about the technology of the product, the thing that's facing the customer.
In a startup, that makes more sense. In a Fortune 500 company, though, I think once you get to a certain point, it's a little bit more different, right? I mean,
absolutely, yeah, no, and that's why I think clarity is required. And even in a Fortune 500 startup, I mean, look at the companies that we've talked to here. These are their business is about taking away the boundary between those things, such that BI in the product and BI within is all one, and you're putting it into a single dashboard and handing it out. So to me, I see, and this might get a little controversial, I see the CTO and the CEO. I don't want to be a CEO. I actually have exactly the job that I want. I want it for different products. I want it in different areas. I want to do different things. This is going to sound really horrible. Those are I think the passion roles, the roles that are about what am I creating for the customer, whereas I see CIO, if you wanted to and make an analog, it's sort of like operations. There are people that are passionate about doing whatever it is the company's doing, but doing it very, very well, doing it securely, and doing it efficiently. CTO doesn't technically, in my definition of it, have to worry about that. They can be like, I want to create a biometric identity platform that's just amazing, and I don't care how marketing gets their financials. Right?
But this is what I mean about the role and the title. I think we're missing the bit. You can call them whatever you want. Call them the IT manager, head of data processing, if you want to go back to those days, right? The role is around, there's a pace of change occurring in the marketplace today. Startups are looking at all manner of industries, financial services in this case today, for example, and looking at taking those things apart. As the person who's in charge of the information technology infrastructure of this enterprise on a global scale, what are we doing about it? And how are we going to embrace, enable, change to do that?
I think you're right on the internal side. I do think there is a need to have perhaps maybe collaborative external understanding, right?
Yeah.
Because at this point, sometimes somebody doesn't know if you're chief digital officer, what does that actually mean? Or
right.
if you're chief information officer, how does that actually compare? And if you want to kind of network with peers and someone says, oh, I'm CTO, I don't handle that, or I'm CIO, I don't handle that, but you're trying to actually kind of build a community and interact. I mean, it can be very difficult. No?
I think the answer is going to vary by company type, industry sector over the next few years. There are cases where the product that faces the market has very little to do with the company.
Yeah.
But there are lots of other cases, probably the majority, where to make money, you have to meld these things seamlessly. If you're going to build people and pay for it and create a seamless experience and make it harder for them to leave,
you're automating away the two jobs into one.
Absolutely.
You're really creating one.
So I need to dig myself out of a hole in a room full of CIOs. I absolutely can't do that job and respect and need it to be
It's
done.
okay. We understand your position.
That's all right. You'll be dead by the time you get halfway
it's
through.
fine. It's fine.
Ritesh called it
They're tearing up my business cards right now.
Ritesh called it a cost center problem. All right, so let's shift gears, I think, to the final topic of the evening. So privacy and security. There's an interesting trade-off, right? I mean, we all give up as much of our privacy as we can, sometimes knowingly, sometimes not so wittingly. But if you use Facebook, you use Google, Gmail, right? I mean, most people have a Gmail account. All of that you're giving to them in return for free service. And sometimes people don't understand that, right? And I think more recently with all of the Facebook stuff and Cambridge Analytica and all of these things that are happening, I think there's really kind of a new level of ethical consideration around privacy. So one of the things that I like about Gmail is I get advertised to very explicitly about what it is that I want to see based upon my email, right? So it's actually good targeting. I got to imagine from a media and a ad agency kind of representative perspective, doing that hyper targeting, that kind of audience of one, that's the Holy Grail for you, right? On the flip side of it, I give you my biometric information so that I can cut the line, right? But I have no idea what you do with it, right? So what is this privacy consideration? What is really kind of at the core of an implication, whether that's the room for abuse, the communication to the customer? Has this come up? Are you guys thinking about this within your organizations?
Every day. It's the number one question that I get. I've answered it today. I've talked about it today. Obviously, privacy. We are a biometric honeypot for all intents and purposes. The metric that I'm sure all you guys know to worry about is who's your customer. Our customers are paying us. You're paying us I don't know how many months I've added to your account,
No,
but
I got it for free.
most people are paying us. And
Wait a minute. We need to
most
chat.
people are paying us.
I'll put you in touch. I know a guy.
It's that classic question. And so I think there's a room, if I'm looking forward. First off, biometrics, while they're scary, we could talk for hours about how it's very important to make sure who has your biometrics is very well secured, well locked down, and well accountable, but also what you're doing with them. So we don't sell it, we don't use it because our customers are our customers. But the interesting piece of that, is there a room for an Amazon Prime of secure social and secure utility? Can I pay? People say, how much would you pay for Facebook? Well, Facebook's already, they've sailed. They're making too much money to offset that. But is there an Amazon-like thing where I can get my social network, my chat, my email, and I can have the keys, and I can get, and then have cohort reporting for that interesting thing, right? People want that. Clear is doing something where we actually allow opt-in sharing of your information. So when you go check in at a Yankees game, you can opt in to share with the Yankees the fact that you were there and when you might come. And we haven't really used that in any real way yet, but it'd be great if I could get offered an upgrade because I said just for this one customer, I'm a customer of the Yankees and a customer of Clear. Therefore, if I put those two together, can I get something useful? But I'm still in control and I can say no. Is there an Amazon Prime type version of that where 10 different products start to create a network of only companies that I trust and only people that I trust have that information?
I mean, I got to imagine the health and wellness side of this touches that same kind of biometric.
Yeah. I'll do three areas. One is around media in general, right? That has been the Holy Grail, and there's lots. We're part of WPP that owns Group M, one of the largest media agencies on the planet, that has data that will blow your mind. Here's the difference. I started working as a data-based marketing person at Citibank many years ago, and we had 30 million Visa MasterCard holders. That's how long ago this was. And my job was to overlay $1.4 million worth of data on that database so we could get psychographic, demographic, lifestyle data. In those days, if I had your phone number, I could tell you the car you drove, the house you owned, the apartment you were in. The difference was I paid for it. I paid R.R. Donnelly $1.4 million a year to get that. Now you give it to me for free. That's the only major difference here.
And
so data's always been available.
Lunch on Instagram too. And
Exactly. I mean, the difference is now I get it for free, and it's at scale because you're giving me touch points that I never had before. I had to buy those, right? On the media side, that's what we're doing, is collecting all that data. But I still can't get to you. I know it's someone who's looking like you.
Well, that's where Facebook changed it. Facebook's connecting to real people.
They
right?
can connect it, but
there's the metadata of one, like the guy on the stage, literally you can get down to that
Come and talk
level.
to us on the media side. But I think, in health and wellness, yes.
We can talk. I actually have a company to talk.
And lastly, I was in Estonia last year. I think where they're heading is the model we should look at, which is every citizen got a digital ID on the blockchain infrastructure. You're now in charge of your data. On the health and wellness side, what they've done is you've got your electronic health record now on your phone, and you unlock it with a key to the doctor.
Estonia is doing this?
In Estonia, the entire country of Estonia is on blockchain, and you each get a digital ID, and that's how you get your driver's license, your health care,
Didn't that card end up
and all of that.
though?
Sorry?
Didn't that card end up compromised, though?
Not really.
I mean, we all have social security numbers here, and now because of Equifax, everyone has mine too. So.
You go back to compromise, it's how are you securing that data? That's the thing we should be working on. The data is always going to be there. We're always going to have data. Well, how are you securing it and making it available?
And that's exactly, that brings up the next kind of piece. So, we're almost
cut you off.
We're running out of time, and Larry, I'd love for your perspective on this. So, obviously, this shifts the burden to security. Right?
Exactly.
The more data we collect, the more that we have a responsibility of securing that data. Maybe you can give us a couple of words. Obviously, you guys have been in the news recently around some of this, but
I think it does, right? And one of the things we do is we hold clients' data, and so it's an important issue for us. People are always going to give up data. People are always going to behave that way. When I went to grad school, the job I had was as a telemarketer. Selling second mortgages. I would call you up on the phone over dinner, and you would give me your social security number, how much money you made, how much money you had in the bank account numbers. I was astounded that people would give this to me over the phone. Fortunately, it was a legitimate operation, and they would actually get it.
I was going to say, as far as you know, I have a great startup idea if you're looking at it.
I was just going to say, have we still got that data?
We can make a lot of money doing it.
But it's amazing to me, right? So I think people, they think we're giving up everything now. I think they were giving up more back then. But security becomes a huge part of it. I think organizations that don't make a real bona fide effort to meet certain standards will be punished. I think the consumers will become more sophisticated about dealing with organizations that they believe show some attention to a standard of care. And I believe that's the change that's going to occur rather than consumers are simply going to become stingy and not share information.
I think you're absolutely right. I think regulation has to have with a more sophisticated consumer base and a more sophisticated attack structure, I think the safe harbors need to become more sophisticated themselves. You've got NIST, you've got FISMA, you've got all these different things. You're going to have to create a deeper vocabulary for them.
Well, look, I think at the end of the day, these are big problems that we're not going to be able to solve in a few minutes on a panel. But I'd like to thank all of you for joining CIO Crossfire. I think all of your viewpoints are very much represented and very appreciated. And so now we're going to break to lunch. And thank you, everyone, for participating.
Thank you.